My dad's stepdad, Grandpa Wilson, is notorious for his awkward behavior, his bad jokes, and his constant need for approval. A few years ago at Christmas, he was off to his usual nonsense. He had given me a ride home from work, and we walk in the front door, and he says, "So, did I get that right?" I looked at him totally confused because how do you drop someone off wrong? I didn't even say thank you or really anything, and my dad saw the entire thing. He pulled me aside and asked me not to treat Grandpa Wilson that way. And of course, I started whining and talking about how annoying he is and all the other mean, hateful things that I'd ever felt about him. And that's when my dad told me a story. A story about how his dad had left when he was just 8 years old. He left him, his mother, and his 3 siblings. And guess who saved the day? My grandfather is so much more than just a guy who needs a high five and a cookie and somebody to laugh at his bad jokes. Today I want to talk about how he went from being an average guy, a divorcee with 2 kids that he never saw, to a father of 4 who worked multiple hours and crazy days to provide for them, and also a big influence in shaping my dad who he is today. Out of all of the things about my grandfather that impressed me so much, I think the thing that reaches me the most is the fact that he walked into this huge family that had already been built and torn apart and took it on with no hesitation. When I interviewed my grandfather, my initial questions were about his family. His first wife decided that she didn't want to be with somebody in the military anymore, that it was too difficult to be uprooted all the time. So they got a divorce and he was transferred to the Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois, leaving his entire family behind. After living in Illinois for about 2 years, he met my grandmother at a dance hall. When I interviewed them, they both said it was love at first sight, and they knew from that moment on that they wanted to be together. So they dated for a while, and when my grandfather went to her house for the first time to meet the family, he walked in and he said, "Hi, my name's Bolt." And my 10-year-old father looks up at him and says, "Bolt? Like a lightning bolt?" To which he responded, "No, more like nuts and bolts." That story is so funny to me because it shows perfectly the type of person that my grandfather really is. He's so quiet and modest and acting as if nothing is a big deal. If it were me walking into a house with a divorced woman, 2 boys under the age of 18, and 2 girls under the age of 10, I would have run screaming the other way. But he looked at the situation with excitement. Taking on a big family like that has got to cost a pretty big chunk of change, right? Don't worry, he had that covered. My grandfather's primary source of income was from the Air Force. When I interviewed him, he couldn't remember exactly how much he made a year, but according to an article called Historical Military Pay Rates from military.com, someone in his position would have been making about $18,370 a year. And according to an article called How Much Does It Cost to Raise a Child from the Blogs WSJ website, to raise a child born in 1960 would have cost about $11,040 a year at that time. So that's $44,124 a year for 4 kids that he adopted as his own when he married my grandmother. And that's not including some unknown amount that he couldn't remember that he was paying his ex-wife in child support and alimony. So you do the math. He's making less than $20,000 a year, and it costs almost $45,000 a year to provide for this family. My grandfather was forced to find a second source of income, and he never worked less than 2 jobs, sometimes even 3. He would get home from his first job around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he would cook these amazing fancy dinners for all the kids and head off to his second job. So my grandmother would come home around 5 or 6 at night, and dinner was on the table, the laundry was done, and her bed was all made up and ready for her to crawl into and wait for him to get home around midnight, all without a single complaint. So we know that my grandfather's a really great person and the best stepdad that anybody could ask for. But he's also one of the people that was most influential in shaping my dad into who he is today. My dad is my idol, and I have always looked up to him. He used to tell me these stories about how he was a different person and had completely different values before my grandpa came into the picture. He said he was disrespectful and almost lazy, in a sense that he wanted these things, but he didn't want to do the work for them. But my grandfather has got such an incredible work ethic and always strives to be the best that he can be. And I think that my dad really took on that trait. Growing up, my sisters and I never wanted for anything, and you couldn't keep my dad home from work. He loves working and providing for his family, and I believe that he got that from my grandfather. So I hope that I have inherited even half of these traits and characteristics that make my grandfather who he is. Today I've shared with you how my grandfather made his journey from one family to another, the amount of raw work and effort that went into that journey, and how he shaped my dad into a man that I respect and love so much today. So now, whenever my grandfather does something goofy, like closes one eye and says, "Did you hear about the pedophile that escaped from prison?" Or asks me how well he did walking from the front door to the back door, I no longer roll my eyes and huff as if somebody has done me some great disservice. Now I remember these things and I smile and I think, how did I get so lucky?